The sky above Velen Prime had turned black with ships. Elder Tivani stood at the great window of the underwater council chamber, her bioluminescent skin flickering with the pale blue light of fear. Through the protective dome, through the ocean water that had sheltered her people for 10,000 years, she could see the shadows of the Kreth warships blocking out the stars. 217 ships. She had counted them herself. Behind her, the council was in chaos. Voices overlapped and crashed against each other like waves in a storm. Some demanded surrender. Others called for a final stand. A few simply wept, their light patterns cycling through grief and terror. "They will harvest us," said Counselor Morath, his voice hollow. "Like they harvested the Tanari, like they harvested the broken moon's civilization. There will be nothing left, not even bones." Tivani did not turn from the window. She had studied the Kreth for 30 years. She knew exactly what they were. The Kreth Dominion did not conquer worlds. They consumed them. Every resource, every life form. They stripped planets down to bare rock and moved on, always hungry, never satisfied. And now they had come to Velen Prime. "We have 3 days," said Military Commander Shen, his light patterns dim with exhaustion. 3 days before their ground forces land. Our defenses will slow them, but they will not stop them. Nothing we have will stop them." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew he spoke the truth. The Velani were a peaceful species. They had built beautiful cities beneath their oceans. They had created art and music and philosophy. They had reached out to the stars with open hands and hopeful hearts. They had never built weapons of war. Now that choice would kill them all. Tivani finally turned from the window. She was old, even by Velani standards. Her luminescent patterns had faded with age, and her movements were slow. But her mind remained sharp, and her memory held secrets that even the council did not know. "There's one option we have not discussed," she said. The council turned to look at her. Counselor Morath made a dismissive gesture. "We have discussed everything, Elder. Surrender, resistance, evacuation. Though we have nowhere to go. Prayer, though no gods have answered. What remains?" Tivani walked slowly to the center of the chamber. Her old bones ached, but she forced herself to stand straight. What she was about to propose would either save her people or doom them faster. 60 years ago, she began. "I was a young scientist working at the Deep Signal Station. We monitored space for communications, for signs of other life. One night, I intercepted something strange." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The memory was still clear after all these decades. It was a beacon, very old, broadcast on a frequency no one uses anymore. The message was in a language I did not recognize, but the translation matrix eventually decoded it. "What did it say?" asked Commander Shen. Tivani closed her eyes. She could still remember the exact words. They had haunted her dreams for 60 years. It said, "If extinction approaches and all hope fails," broadcast on frequency 7.77. "Help will come, but understand what you summon. Understand what you call from the dark between stars. Once called, they cannot be uncalled. Once woken, they do not sleep again." The council members exchanged confused looks. Counselor Morath waved his hand impatiently. "Riddles and poetry," he said. "This helps us nothing. Who sent this message? What species?" "The beacon identified them as the Galactic Concord," said Tivani. "A mutual defense alliance. The beacon was placed for 100 years ago." "For 100 years?" Morath laughed bitterly. "The Concord fell 3 centuries ago. They are dust and memory. There's no help coming from ghosts." "The Concord fell," Tivani agreed. "But one of their founding species did not. They still monitor that frequency. They still answer calls." Commander Shen leaned forward. "Which species?" Tivani hesitated. This was the moment. Once she spoke the name, there would be no taking it back. The council would either laugh at her or tremble, and she was not certain which would be worse. "Humans," she said. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Counselor Veth, who had been quiet until now, began to laugh. It was not a happy sound. "Humans," he said. "Humans are a myth, a story that frightened species tell to their children. The monsters from the death world, the creatures that eat poison and breathe fire and refuse to die. They are not real, Elder. They are campfire tales, They are real, said Tivani firmly. I have spent 60 years researching them. The records are scattered and incomplete, but they exist. Humans are real, and they answer distress calls. Even if they were real, said Morath, why would they help us? We have nothing to offer them. We are small and weak and peaceful. What interest would such creatures have in saving us? I do not know, Tivani admitted. The records do not say why they come, only that they do. Every species that has broadcast on that frequency and survived to tell the tale says the same thing. They called and humans came. Commander Shen stood up slowly. His light patterns were thoughtful now, calculating. The Kreth fear something, he said quietly. I have studied their military doctrine. They are aggressive, yes. Brutal, yes. But they avoid certain regions of space. They do not speak of why. And in their oldest texts, there are warnings about a death world species that should never be provoked. Children's stories, said Morath, but his voice was less certain now. Perhaps, said Shen, or perhaps the Kreth remember something we have forgotten. Tivani looked round the chamber at her fellow council members. She saw fear on every face. Fear of the Kreth, fear of extinction, and now, perhaps, fear of something else entirely. We are going to die, she said simply. In 3 days, the Kreth will land, and they will kill us all. Our children, our elders, our entire civilization. Everything we have built will be erased, and no one will remember we ever existed. She paused to let those words sink in. I am offering you a chance, a small chance. Perhaps the humans will not come. Perhaps the beacon is too old, the frequency no longer monitored. Perhaps they are myth after all. But if there is even the smallest possibility that help exists, do we not owe it to our children to try? Counselor Morath opened his mouth to argue, but another voice cut him off. I vote yes. Everyone turned to look at Counselor Vel, the youngest member of the council. She was barely into her adult years, her bioluminescence still bright with youth. I have children, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. 3 of them. I will try anything to save them, even summoning monsters from the dark. One by one, the other council members added their voices. Some voted yes immediately. Others hesitated, argued, but eventually agreed. When the count was finished, the decision was unanimous. They would broadcast on frequency 7.77. They would call for humans. Tivani led the council to the communication center. Her hands trembled as she programmed the ancient frequency. The equipment was old and barely functional, but it worked. It had to work. What do we say? Asked Commander Shen. Tivani thought for a moment. Then she activated the broadcast. This is the Vellani species of Velen Prime. We are under attack by the Kreth Dominion. 200 warships. Ground forces landing in 3 days. We have no weapons. We have no allies. We have no hope. If anyone hears this message, please help us. We do not want to die. She ended the broadcast and stood back. The council waited in silence. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. It was worth trying, said Morath quietly. For once, his voice held no mockery. Tivani nodded slowly. She had not really expected an answer. 400 years was a long time. Perhaps the humans had forgotten. Perhaps they had never existed at all. She turned to leave the communication center, already thinking about how to prepare her people for the end. Then the console beeped. Everyone froze. A message was coming in. Text only, simple and direct. Signal received. Hold position. Help en route. ETA, 2.7 standard days. Shepherd vessel last resort. Tivani stared at the words. Her hearts were beating so fast she thought they might burst. What is a shepherd? Asked Counselor Vel. I do not know, Tivani whispered. But they are coming. Someone is coming. Far across the galaxy, in a small monitoring station on a moon that had no name. A human technician named James Okonkwo stared at his console in disbelief. The light was blinking red. The frequency 7.7.7 light. The light that had not blinked in 400 years. He reached for his communicator with shaking hands. Captain Singh, he said. We have a shepherd call. I repeat, we have a shepherd call. Someone needs help. On the bridge of the carrier vessel last resort. Captain Amara Singh set down her coffee cup and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just heard the dinner bell. "Change course," she said calmly. "All hands to stations. We have work to do." The last resort turned toward Velen Prime, and the stars themselves seemed to shiver. The humans were coming. The last resort was not a beautiful ship. It was built for function, not form. Sharp angles and heavy armor plating. Weapon systems that bristled from every surface like the spines of an angry creature. The ship looked exactly like what it was, a machine designed for violence. Captain Amara Singh walked through the corridors, her boots echoing against the metal floor. She was a tall woman with dark skin and gray hair cut short against her skull. Scars marked her face and hands, each one a memory of battle survived. She was 53 years old, and she had been a shepherd for 30 of those years. The crew of the last resort numbered 97 humans. Each one had volunteered for this duty. Each one had trained for years. Each one understood that they might not come home from any given mission. They did it anyway. Singh reached the briefing room where her senior officers were waiting. Commander Elena Kowalski, the chief engineer, Lieutenant Hassan al-Rashid, the tactical officer, Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's doctor and xenobiologist, and Sergeant Major Thomas Brennan, who led the ground combat team. "Report," said Singh as she took her seat. Kowalski pulled up a holographic display. The Velen system appeared, with the enemy fleet shown as red dots surrounding the planet. 217 Kreth warships, she said. Mostly medium cruisers, but there are at least 12 heavy dreadnoughts. Their flagship appears to be the Hunger of Voroth, a command carrier. "Ground forces?" asked Singh. "Still in orbit," said al-Rashid. "They haven't landed yet. Our intel suggests they're waiting for the planetary defense grid to be destroyed. The Volani have some orbital stations, but they're not military. Just research platforms and communication hubs." Singh studied the display. The numbers were bad, very bad, but numbers had never stopped humans before. "What do we know about the Volani?" she asked. Dr. Chen spoke up. "Peaceful amphibian species. Bioluminescent. They live primarily underwater. No military to speak of. Their entire civilization is focused on art, science, and philosophy. They've never fought a war in their recorded history, and the Kreth are going to eat them alive," said Brennan. His voice was flat, but his hands were clenched into fists. "Not if we get there first," said Singh. Kowalski hesitated. "Captain, I need to point out that we are one ship against 200. The math doesn't work." Singh smiled that cold smile again. "The math never works. That's not the point." She stood and walked to the display, zooming in on the Kreth flagship. "The Kreth are bullies," she said. "They attack weak species because they're afraid of strong ones. They've never faced a real fight in their existence. They don't know what it's like to face someone who refuses to give up." She turned to face her officers. "We're not going to destroy their fleet. We're going to break their will. There's a difference." Al-Rashid nodded slowly. "Psychological warfare. Hit them where it hurts most. Make them afraid. Make them remember," Singh corrected. "The Kreth have old stories about humans, legends, nightmares. We're going to remind them why those stories exist." The officers exchanged glances. They had served with Singh for years. They knew she was more than capable of doing exactly what she said. "What's the plan?" asked Brennan. Singh began laying out her strategy. Meanwhile, on Velen Prime, the situation was growing desperate. Young Kel swam through the underwater streets of his city, dodging crowds of panicking civilians. He was barely into adulthood, his bioluminescent patterns still shifting with the uncertainty of youth. His parents had sent him to find news from the council, and he had been swimming for hours. The city was in chaos. Families were trying to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The Kreth ships had surrounded the planet. No vessel could escape. Some people had given up entirely, sitting in their homes and waiting for the end. Others were praying. Kel reached the council building and pushed his way inside. The guards barely noticed him. They were staring at their communication devices, listening to broadcasts from the surface. The Kreth had landed. Not the main force, not yet. But small parties of soldiers had come down in advanced ships. They were moving through coastal settlements, taking prisoners, killing anyone who resisted. The broadcasts were full of screaming. Kel found his Aunt Tavani in the communication center. The elder looked exhausted, her light patterns dim and flickering. She had not slept since sending the message 2 days ago. "Aunt," said Kel, using the family term despite the formal setting. "What is happening?" Tavani turned to look at him. For a moment, her expression was empty. Then she seemed to recognize him. "The Kreth are beginning their harvest," she said. "The main force will land tomorrow. It will be over quickly after that. And the humans?" Kel had heard the rumors. Everyone had. A message had come. Help was on the way. Tavani gestured at a screen showing the space around their planet. The Kreth fleet filled the display. But in the corner, barely visible, was a single new dot. "One ship," she said. "They sent one ship." Kel stared at the display. His heart sank. "One ship against 200? That cannot be right," he said. "There must be more coming." "There is no more. Just one ship. They call it the last resort, on the surface of Velen Prime." Commander Voroth of the Kreth Dominion watched his soldiers round up the first batch of prisoners. The amphibian creatures were pathetic, really. They barely struggled. They just wept and flashed their little lights and begged for mercy. Mercy was not something the Kreth understood. Voroth was a massive creature, even by Kreth standards. His carapace was covered in the trophies of conquered species, teeth, bones, bits of technology from civilizations that no longer existed. He had personally overseen the harvest of 12 worlds. Velen Prime would be his 13th. "Commander," said one of his officers, approaching with a communication tablet. "We have received a transmission from the planet." "No, Commander." "From space. From the unknown vessel." Voroth took the tablet and read the message. Then he read it again. Then he began to laugh. The message was simple. "Kreth Dominion forces. You are engaged in an act of genocide. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw. There will be no second warning." 1 hour, Voroth said, still laughing. "They give us 1 hour. One ship gives us 1 hour." He turned to his communication officer. "Open a channel to this vessel. I wish to speak with their commander." The channel opened. Voroth saw a human face on his screen for the first time. A female, he thought, though it was hard to tell with soft-skinned species. She had dark coloring and cold eyes. "I am Commander Voroth of the Kreth Dominion," he said. "I received your message. It amused me greatly. I'm glad," said the human. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You should enjoy your last hour." Voroth's laughter died. Something about her voice bothered him. There was no fear in it, no uncertainty, just absolute, terrifying certainty. "You are 1 ship," he said. "I have 200. What do you think you can do?" The human smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "We're going to teach you something, Commander. A lesson your ancestors learned and your people forgot. We're going to teach you why you should never corner something that has nothing left to lose." "You are the ones who are cornered," Voroth snarled. "You are alone. No help is coming for you." "We don't need help," said the human. "We're humans. We are the help." She cut the transmission. Voroth stared at the blank screen. His officer was watching him with concern. "Commander, should we be worried?" Voroth shook his head violently, forcing away the strange feeling of unease. 1 ship, 1 primitive death world species. They are nothing. They are insects, but deep in his racial memory, in the part of his brain that his ancestors had built through millions of years of evolution, something whispered a warning. Something remembered. "The predator is coming." On the last resort, Captain Singh turned away from the communication console. "Well," she said, "that went about as expected." Kowalski looked up from her engineering station. "They didn't withdraw. They never do." Singh walked to the center of the bridge. "All hands, this is the captain. We have 57 minutes until the deadline expires. Use the time well. Write letters home if you need to. Make peace with whatever gods you believe in. When that hour is up, we're going to war." She paused. "I know the numbers look bad. I know some of you are scared. That's okay. Being scared means you're smart. But I've served with every single one of you, and I know what you're capable of. We're not here to win a battle. We're here to save a species. And we're going to do it, or we're going to die trying." Her voice hardened. "The Kreth think they're predators. They're wrong. They're scavengers who prey on the weak. They've never met a real predator. They've never met us. In 57 minutes, we're going to introduce ourselves, She smiled that cold, terrible smile. "Let's remind the galaxy what humans are." In the underwater city below, young Kel watched the countdown on the communication screen. 57 minutes. Less than an hour until one ship tried to fight to 100. "They're going to die," he said quietly. Elder Tivani put her hand on his shoulder. Her light patterns were strange, flickering between fear and something else. Something that might have been hope. "Perhaps," she said. "But they came anyway. They heard our call, and they came. Whatever happens next, remember that. When we were alone and afraid, someone answered." The countdown continued. 50 minutes, 45, 40. The galaxy held its breath. The hour was almost over. On the bridge of the last resort, the crew waited in silence. Every station was manned. Every weapon was charged. Every system had been checked and rechecked. There was nothing left to do but wait. Captain Singh sat in her command chair, her eyes fixed on the main display. The Kreth fleet hung in space like a swarm of angry insects. 217 ships, enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. And they were all pointed at her. 15 minutes, said Lieutenant Al-Rashid quietly. Singh nodded. She had spent the past 45 minutes walking the ship, talking to her crew. She had shaken hands and shared words of encouragement. She had listened to fears and answered questions. It was something she always did before a fight. Her crew was ready. They were scared, yes, but they were also determined. Every single one of them had volunteered for the Shepherd program. They knew what it meant. They knew the risks. Engineer Kowalski was running final checks on the engine systems. "Captain, I've pushed the reactors to 115%. We'll have more speed and more power, but we'll burn out the cores in about an hour. That's fine," said Singh. "We won't need more than an hour." Dr. Chen looked up from her console. "Medical bay is ready. I've got trauma stations prepared for the worst." "Good. How many casualties are you expecting?" Chen hesitated. "All of us, Captain. I'm expecting all of us." Singh smiled grimly. "Let's try to disappoint you." In the armory, Sergeant Major Brennan was briefing his ground team. 47 soldiers in heavy combat armor. The best fighters humanity had. They stood in perfect rows, their faces calm and focused. "Listen up," said Brennan. His voice was rough from decades of shouting orders on battlefields. "The Navy's going to do their job up here. Our job is down there. If the ship gets disabled, we're boarding the enemy flagship." One of the younger soldiers raised her hand. "Sergeant Major, the flagship has over 10,000 crew members. I know. There are 47 of us. I can count. Private." Brennan's expression didn't change. "The Kreth have never fought humans in close combat. They don't know what we're capable of. They think numbers matter. They think size matters. They're wrong." He walked down the line of soldiers, looking each one in the eye. "Humans survived an ice age. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived 2 world wars and came out stronger. We're the most stubborn, most adaptable, most dangerous species in the galaxy. And today, we're going to prove it." He stopped at the end of the line. "The Villani are counting on us. They called for help, and we answered. That's what we do. That's who we are. We don't abandon people in need. We don't run from bullies. We stand and fight." The soldiers straightened, their eyes hard with resolve. "Check your gear," said Brennan. "Say your prayers, and get ready to make some history." On Velen Prime, the waiting was unbearable. Elder Tivani had not left the communication center. She watched the displays showing the confrontation in space, her heart's beating painfully fast. Around her, other Villani had gathered, unable to stay away. They needed to see what would happen. Young Kel stood beside his aunt, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with anxiety. "The hour is almost over," he said. "I know. What will the humans do?" Tivani shook her head. "I do not know. The records say they fight differently than any other species. They take risks that seem insane. They refuse to retreat even when logic demands it. They just keep coming." That sounds terrifying. It is. For their enemies, on the surface, Commander Voroth watched the countdown with growing irritation. The human ship had not moved. It simply sat there waiting. Voroth had half expected them to flee when they saw the size of his fleet. Any rational species would have. But humans, apparently, were not rational. 30 seconds, said his tactical officer. Voroth opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, prepare to engage. Destroy the human vessel. Make it quick. I want to finish the harvest before the planet rotates again. The countdown reached 0. Nothing happened. For one long moment, the space around Velen Prime was perfectly still. The human ship hung motionless. The Kreth fleet waited, weapons charged and ready. Then every light on the last resort went dark. On the Volani communication screens, the human ship simply vanished from sensors. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Not destroyed, just gone. Where did it go? Voroth demanded. His tactical officer was frantically adjusting controls. I don't know, Commander. It's not showing on any of our sensors. It's like it was never there. That was when the first Kreth ship exploded. Nobody saw what hit it. One moment the cruiser was intact, the next it was a spreading cloud of debris. Then another ship exploded. Then another. There, screamed a sensor operator. I see it. For just a fraction of a second, the last resort appeared on their screens. It was moving impossibly fast, weaving through the Kreth formation like a predator through a herd of prey. Then it vanished again. 2 more ships died. How are they moving that fast? Voroth's voice was rising toward panic. Nothing can move that fast. Aboard the last resort, Captain Singh gripped her chair as the ship screamed through another turn. The inertial dampeners were struggling to keep up. Every bone in her body ached from the G-forces. Target the command ships, she ordered. Take out their coordination. Al-Rashid's hands flew across his console. Firing solution locked. Missiles away. The last resort's weapons were not numerous, but they were incredibly advanced. Human engineers had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction. Every missile was a masterpiece of deadly design. 3 more Kreth command ships vanished in balls of fire. The Kreth fleet was in chaos. Ships were firing wildly, often hitting each other in their panic. The human vessel appeared and disappeared like a ghost, striking and vanishing before anyone could react. This is impossible, Voroth whispered. This is impossible. His first officer grabbed his arm. Commander, we need to coordinate our response. The fleet is falling apart. Voroth shook off the hand and forced himself to think. He was a veteran of 12 conquests. He had faced resistance before. Never like this, but still, he knew how to fight. All ships, form defensive clusters, he ordered. Concentrate fire on predicted trajectories. They can't dodge forever. The Kreth fleet began to reorganize. It was sloppy and slow, but gradually the ships pulled into formation. Concentrated weapons fire filled the space where the human ship kept appearing. We're taking hits, reported Kowalski from engineering. Shields at 60% and falling. Singh nodded. They're adapting. Good. That means it's time for Phase 2. She opened a channel to Brennan. Sergeant Major, get your team ready. We're going to board their flagship. Understood, Captain. We're already in the pods. The last resort took another hit. The ship shuddered, and warning lights began to flash across the bridge. Shields at 40%, said Kowalski. They're focusing fire on us now. Al-Rashid, clear me a path to the flagship. The tactical officer nodded and launched another spread of missiles. Kreth ships scattered to avoid the incoming fire, opening a gap in their formation. Singh smiled. Helm, take us in. Ramming speed. The pilot looked back at her with wide eyes. Captain, you heard me. Ramming speed. Get us close enough to launch the boarding pods, then pull away if you can. The last resort accelerated toward the Kreth flagship. Every enemy ship in range opened fire. The vessel shook with impact after impact. Hull breaches began appearing throughout the ship. Shields down, shouted Kowalski. We're taking direct hits. Hold together, girl, Singh whispered to her ship. Just a little longer, on the Kreth flagship. Commander Voroth watched the human ship flying straight at him. It was on fire. Pieces were breaking off. It was clearly dying, but it was not slowing down. Destroy it, Voroth screamed. Kill it before it reaches us. Every weapon on the flagship fired at once. The human ship took hit after hit. Its engines exploded. Its forward section crumpled. It should have been dead. It kept coming. In the last moment before impact, 47 small objects launched from the wreckage of the last resort. Boarding pods. They crossed the distance to the flagship in seconds, slamming into the hull with enough force to breach the armor. The last resort finally stopped moving, drifting away as a burning hulk. But its crew had done their job. The humans were aboard. On Velen Prime, Kel watched the battle through the communication display. He saw the human ship die. His heart sank. Then he saw the boarding pods launch. "What are they doing?" he asked. Elder Tavani's voice was filled with wonder and terror. "They're boarding the flagship. Their ship is destroyed, and they're attacking. But that's insane. There are thousands of Kreth on that ship." Yes, Tivani's light patterns were flickering rapidly. "And 47 humans. The Kreth have no idea what's about to happen to them on the hunger of Vorath. The first Kreth soldiers who responded to the breach died before they even saw their enemy. Humans moved through the dark corridors like ghosts made of violence. Their weapons fired in short, precise bursts. Their movements were coordinated and lethal. They didn't hesitate. They didn't slow down. They just kept coming." Sergeant Major Brennan led the assault, his rifle spitting death at everything that moved. Behind him, his soldiers spread out in perfect formation. "Objective is the bridge," he said through the team channel. "We take Vorath alive if possible. Dead if necessary. Move fast, hit hard, don't stop for anything." The hunger of Vorath was 10 kilometers long. It carried a crew of 12,000 Kreth warriors. It had weapons capable of destroying cities. It was the pride of the Dominion, a symbol of their unstoppable power. And it was being torn apart from the inside by 47 humans. Sergeant Major Brennan moved through the corridors like death itself. His armor was scarred from a dozen near misses. His rifle had run out of ammunition twice, and he had resupplied from fallen enemies. Blood covered his boots, none of it his own. Behind him, his team had split into smaller groups. They were causing chaos throughout the ship, drawing Kreth forces away from the main assault. Every few minutes, another explosion echoed through the hull as humans destroyed something critical. "Team 3, report," Brennan said into his communicator. "We're in engineering," came the response. "Setting charges on the main reactor. If we need to, we can blow this whole ship. Hold that option. We're heading for the bridge." Brennan had lost 8 soldiers so far. 8 humans against over 1,000 Kreth. The math was getting worse. But the humans weren't slowing down. They couldn't slow down. The moment they stopped moving was the moment they died. Corporal Lisa Chen, no relation to the ship's doctor, appeared at Brennan's side. She was young, barely 25, but she had already proven herself a dozen times during this assault. "Sergeant Major, I've tapped into their internal communications. The Kreth are panicking. They don't understand how we're moving so fast." "Good. Use that. Send false reports. Make them think we have more soldiers than we do." Chen nodded and started working on her tablet. On the bridge of the flagship, Commander Vorath was losing his mind. Reports were coming in from all over the ship. Humans here, humans there, humans everywhere. His soldiers were being slaughtered in the corridors. His engineers were being killed at their stations. His ship was falling apart around him. "How many are there?" He screamed at his officers. "We don't know, Commander. Our sensors show at least 200, but that's impossible. The boarding pods couldn't have carried that many. 200. Vorath felt a chill run down his spine. The human ship had been small. Surely it couldn't have held 100 soldiers. But then again, he had watched that same small ship destroy 30 of his vessels before it was finally stopped. Nothing about humans made sense. "Seal the bridge," he ordered. "Bring every available soldier to defend this position. And someone get me a weapon." An officer handed him a ceremonial blade. Vorath gripped it tightly. If the humans reached the bridge, he would fight them himself, outside the bridge. Brennan and his remaining soldiers gathered in a maintenance corridor. There were 23 of them left, 23 out of 47. "Intel says there are about 500 Kreth between us and the bridge," said Chen. "Plus automated defenses, plus whatever Vorath has for personal guards." Brennan nodded. The numbers were bad, but numbers had been bad since the start. "Anyone want to go home?" he asked. Nobody moved. "Good, because I wasn't going to let you anyway." He checked his weapon one more time. We breach in 30 seconds. Hit them hard and don't stop until Voroth is dead or captured. Remember why we're here. The Volani, someone said quietly. That's right. There's a whole species counting on us. They called for help, and we answered. Now we finished the job. He raised his fist and began the countdown. On the burning wreck of the last resort, Captain Amara Singh opened her eyes. She was pinned under a collapsed beam. Her left arm was broken. Her head was bleeding. Every breath sent fire through her chest, which meant at least some broken ribs. But she was alive. She looked around the ruined bridge. Bodies lay everywhere. Her crew, her family, scattered like broken dolls. Some were moving, groaning with pain. Others were still. Report. CROAKED. No answer came from the main systems. They were dead. But her personal communicator still worked. This is Captain Singh. Anyone still alive? Respond. A few weak voices came back. Kowalski was alive, trapped in engineering. Dr. Chen was in the medical bay with a handful of survivors. A dozen other crew members were scattered throughout the wreck. We're not done yet, Singh said. Anyone who can move, get to the emergency power station. We might still have some fight left. She began the painful process of freeing herself from the debris. Outside the ship, the Kref fleet was in disarray. The destruction of the last resort should have ended the threat. The human ship was nothing but floating wreckage now. But somehow, the terror had not stopped. Every few minutes, another report came in. Humans on the flagship. Humans destroying things. Humans killing everyone they encountered. The boarding assault was spreading panic throughout the entire fleet. Ships were starting to drift out of formation. Captains were arguing over the communication channels. Some wanted to help the flagship. Others wanted to destroy it before the humans could take control. And on Velen Prime, the Volani watched in stunned silence. Elder Tavani had not moved from her position at the communication center. She had watched the battle unfold, watched the human ship sacrifice itself, watched the impossible assault on the enemy flagship. They're still fighting, she whispered. Young Kel stood beside her, his light patterns dim with exhaustion and shock. Their ship was destroyed. They should be dead. Why are they still fighting? Because they're human. Tivani's voice was filled with wonder. They don't know how to stop. The broadcasts from the Kref flagship were being intercepted and displayed on the Volani. Screens, chaos, screaming, gunfire, human. Soldiers appearing from nowhere and disappearing just as fast. The mighty Kref, conquerors of 12 worlds, running in terror from a handful of attackers. Commander Voroth's voice came through the speakers. He was shouting orders, trying to rally his troops. But there was something in his voice that the Volani had never heard before. Fear. The commander of the Kref Dominion was afraid. On the flagship, Brennan and his soldiers breached the bridge defenses. The Kref had built barricades. They had positioned their best warriors. They had set up automated weapons and force, fields and everything they could think of to stop. The human advance. It wasn't enough. The humans came through the walls. Brennan had gotten tired of fighting through corridors, so he had his soldiers cut through the hull itself, bypassing the defenses entirely. They emerged in the middle of the bridge, weapons firing in all directions. The Kref guards died in seconds. Voroth faced the human sergeant with his ceremonial blade raised. His hand was shaking, but he refused to show weakness. You cannot win, he said. Even if you kill me, my fleet will destroy you. Brennan lowered his rifle. He looked at the Kref commander with something that might have been pity. Your fleet is falling apart. Your soldiers are running. You've lost. The only question is how many more have to die before you admit it. We are Kref. We do not surrender. Then you'll die. Brennan raised his rifle again. Last chance. Call off your fleet. Leave this system. Never come back. Voroth's blade trembled. He looked around the bridge at the bodies of his officers, his guards, his friends. He had never lost before. He had never even considered the possibility. But looking into the cold eyes of the human soldier, he finally understood. The legends were true. Humans were exactly as dangerous as the old stories said. Maybe more. They had come to this system with 1 ship and 97 soldiers, and they had brought the entire Dominion fleet to its knees. This wasn't a battle. This was a reckoning. If I surrender, Voroth said slowly, what happens to my people? You leave. All of you. You go back to your space and you never bother the Volani again. You tell everyone you meet what happened here. You make sure no one ever thinks about attacking this species again. And me? Brennan's expression didn't change. You answer for the people you've already killed. The Volani will decide what that looks like. Voroth closed his eyes. His entire life, he had been a conqueror. He had never imagined being on the other side of the blade. But he also wanted to live. He wanted his species to survive. The blade clattered to the floor. I surrender, said Commander Voroth. The Dominion surrenders. Brennan nodded and activated his communicator. Captain Singh, if you can hear me, we've taken the flagship. Voroth has surrendered. The battle is over. On the wreck of the last resort, Captain Singh heard the message. She was sitting in the emergency power station, her broken arm bound to her chest, her face streaked with blood and tears. 19 humans had survived the crash, 19 out of 97. But they had won. She opened a channel to the Volani Communications Center. Velen Prime, this is Captain Amara Singh of the human vessel Last Resort. The Kreth Dominion has surrendered. Your people are safe in the underwater city. Elder Tavani heard those words and began to weep. Around her, other Volani joined in, their tears mixing with the water that surrounded them. They had called for help, and help had come. The Kreth fleet withdrew 3 days after the battle. 217 ships had arrived at Velen Prime. 183 left. The rest were debris, scattered across the system like tombstones marking the cost of their arrogance. Commander Voroth was taken into Volani custody. He would face trial for the murders he had ordered during the initial landing. The Volani had never held a war crimes tribunal before. They would have to create an entire legal system just to deal with him. But that was a problem for later. Right now, all that mattered was that the killing had stopped. Young Kel swam through the waters above his city, looking up at the sky. The dark shadows of the Kreth ships were gone. For the first time in weeks, he could see the stars again. His Aunt Tavani had asked him to perform an important task. He was to meet the humans and guide them to the council chamber. It was an honor he didn't feel worthy of, but he had accepted anyway. The human survivors had been brought down to the planet in rescue pods from the captured flagship. There were only 19 of them left, 19 out of 97. The rest had died in the battle. Kel found them waiting at the surface docking station. They looked terrible. Bandages covered wounds. Some could barely stand. Their captain, a dark-skinned woman with gray hair, had her arm in a sling and moved with obvious pain. But they were smiling. You must be our guide, said the captain. Her voice was tired but warm. Yes, honored one. I am Kel. I will take you to the council. Good. Lead the way, Kel. The underwater journey to the council chamber was slow. The humans needed special equipment to breathe, and some were too injured to swim quickly. But none of them complained. They simply followed Kel through the beautiful underwater city, looking around with wonder at the bioluminescent buildings and the peaceful Volani going about their lives. It's beautiful here, said one of the soldiers, a young woman with burns covering half her face. It is, Kel agreed. Our ancestors built this city 3,000 years ago. We have never known war. We never thought we would need to. That's not a bad thing, said the captain. Peace is precious. You should protect it. We could not protect it. You did. The captain shook her head. We helped. But this is your home, your people. In the end, you'll have to decide what kind of future you want. They reached the council chamber. The entire council was waiting, along with hundreds of other Volani who had come to see the humans with their own eyes. The chamber was filled with the soft glow of bioluminescent patterns, expressions of gratitude and awe. Elder Tavani stepped forward. She looked better than she had during the battle, though the stress of the past weeks still showed in her faded light patterns. Captain Singh, she said, on behalf of the Volani people, I welcome you to our world. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Singh bowed her head. We're just glad we could help. Your soldiers, your ship, so many died for us. We are strangers to you. Why did you sacrifice so much for people you do not know? The chamber fell silent. Every Volani leaned forward, waiting for the answer. This was the question that had haunted them since the message first arrived. Why would anyone do what the humans had done? Sing looked round the chamber. She saw the hope on their faces, the desperate need to understand. "Can I tell you a story?" she asked. Tivani nodded. Sing sat down slowly, wincing from her injuries. The other humans gathered around her, listening as if they hadn't heard this story 1,000 times before. A long time ago, Sing began, humans were alone in the universe. We had no allies, no friends. We were stuck on a single planet, fighting among ourselves, slowly destroying our own home. She paused, remembering. Then we found out we weren't alone. We made contact with other species. Some were friendly, most were not. We were young and weak and had nothing to offer. The powerful civilizations looked at us and saw nothing worth protecting. "What happened?" asked Kel. "We were attacked. A species called the Harvesters. They came to Earth with a fleet twice the size of what the Kreth brought here. They wanted our planet. They didn't care about us. To them, we were just obstacles to be removed." Sing's voice hardened. "We called for help. We broadcast on every frequency. We begged anyone who would listen to come save us. And do you know what we heard back? Silence filled the chamber. Nothing. No one came. No one even responded. The galaxy heard us screaming, and they turned away." Tivani's light patterns flickered with horror. "How did you survive?" "We fought. We fought with everything we had. Weapons, vehicles, our bare hands when we had nothing else. The war lasted 20 years. Billions of us died. But in the end, we won. We drove the Harvesters out and hunted them across the galaxy until not a single one remained." Sing looked directly at Tivani. "After that, we made a promise. We swore that no one would ever call for help and hear only silence. Not on our watch. No matter how far away. No matter how dangerous. If someone was facing extinction and called out for help, humans would answer." "The Shepherd Program," said Tivani. "Yes, we've been doing this for 400 years. Answering calls. Protecting the weak. Sometimes we win easily. Sometimes we barely survive. Sometimes we don't survive at all. But we always answer." Counselor Moroth stepped forward. His earlier skepticism was completely gone, replaced by something like reverence. "You lost 78 of your people saving us. How can we possibly honor such a sacrifice?" Sing stood up slowly. "You don't owe us anything. We didn't come here for payment. We came because it was the right thing to do." She paused. "But if you want to honor the humans who died here, there is one thing you can do. Name it," said Tivani. Remember that someone came when you called. Remember that you don't have to face the darkness alone. And someday, when you're strong enough, when you hear someone else calling out for help." She looked at young Kel. "Answer." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Tivani's light patterns began to glow brighter. Other Villani joined her, their bioluminescence filling the chamber with warm light. "We will remember," said Tivani. "We will honor your fallen. And we will build a future worthy of their sacrifice." Sing smiled. It was a tired smile, full of pain and loss. But there was hope in it too. "That's all we ask." The humans stayed on Velen Prime for 3 months. They helped rebuild the damaged settlements. They trained Villani volunteers in basic defense. They shared technology and knowledge freely. When they finally left, the entire planet came out to watch their ship depart. It was a new vessel, built with Villani help, named in honor of the 97 humans who had given everything. The hope of Velen. 50 years passed. Thank you for watching.